Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As always, it is an honour to rise in this House and speak on the behalf of the members of my community of Peterborough-Kawartha. The purpose of tonight's Take Note debate is to bring forth a discussion on a very serious issue and to call on the Liberals to listen. We have a crisis that's been happening for decades, and tonight we are demanding action. I will provide a trigger warning for anyone watching or listening. This is a very heavy topic, and it can be triggering for some people watching. Tonight we are speaking about murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in Canada. Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, Buffalo Woman. These are the names of the 4 Indigenous women murdered in Winnipeg. It is important to say their names. It is important to bring these women home to their families. It is important that the families of these women see justice. The last updated number I could find was 307 murdered and missing Indigenous women. As shocking as this statistic is, this is from 2018. How many more are there? Why isn't this a priority? Indigenous women and girls in Canada are disproportionately affected by all forms of violence. Although Indigenous women make up 4% of Canada's female population, 16% of all women murdered in Canada between 1980 and 2012 were Indigenous. The 2019 General Social Survey on Victimization, along with Statistics Canada data, has indicated that Indigenous women were more likely to experience intimate partner violence than non-Indigenous women. During a study on sex trafficking of Indigenous peoples, experts said 52% of human trafficking victims are Indigenous, and that the average age of exploitation of an Indigenous girl was 12 years old. Although the Indigenous population up to the age of 14 makes up 7.7% of all Canadian children, they represent 52.2% of the children in the child welfare system. Studies have shown these children in the system are more likely to enter into prostitution. This is not information that is new to the government. It is at the disposal of the government, but nothing has changed. We see no action on this human rights issue. When a woman is targeted for violence because of her gender or because of her Indigenous identity, her fundamental rights have been abused. And when she is not offered an adequate level of protection by state authorities because of her gender or because of her Indigenous identity, those rights have been violated. This is a quote from Amnesty International's report, Stolen Sisters, Discrimination and Violence Against Indigenous Women in Canada. The date of its release? 2004. 18 years, Mr. Speaker. This is shameful, and past governments, all of them, must share the blame in perpetuating the broken system that has left Indigenous women and girls behind. After 2 years of release of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report, this current government finally released an action plan on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, a plan that many have called flawed, toxic, and unsafe. University of Western Ontario professor Michael Arntfield, an expert on serial murder and cold cases, told the Toronto Sun, the government and its army of bureaucrats are chiefly to blame for the continuing crisis. This is another solemn reminder of the fact that despite all the lip service in the world, the proper resources from the top down are still not being properly allocated. Meaningful reconciliation involves more than just funding announcements and photo ops. It requires partnership and collaboration with Indigenous communities across Canada. There is so much more work to be done to protect the lives of Indigenous women and girls across our country. Bad people commit these horrible crimes against Native women, said Melinda Limberhand, mother of Hannah Harris, who was murdered in 2013 on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. But it is the system that allows it to happen generation after generation. Mr. Speaker, there has to be change. Enough is enough. We need to see tangible results that meaningfully improve the lives of Indigenous women and girls. This starts with the federal government implementing its portion of the 231 calls to action from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report, including a standardization of protocols for policies and practices that ensure that all cases are thoroughly investigated, establishing a national task force to review and, if required, to reinvestigate cases across Canada, ensuring protection orders are available, accessible, promptly issued, and effectively serviced and resourced to protect victims. Canada's Conservatives are focused on bringing forward policies that make real and measurable improvements in the lives of Canada's Indigenous peoples. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity now to speak on a devastating loss in my local community of Curve Lake First Nation. Cileana Taylor was 22 years old when she was brutally attacked by her partner on September 3rd, 2020. Cileana was on life support for 6 months before she passed away with her family at her side. The man who attacked her was out on bail for a previous assault charge dating back to 2019, when he was charged for aggravated assault on Ms. Taylor. He was released on bail on February 3rd, 3 weeks before Cileana died. The charge of aggravated assault is not enough when one of our young Indigenous women has died from this violent assault. This is a quote from Chief Laurie Carr, who sent a letter of support on behalf of the Hiawatha First Nation Council. Our community has supported Cileana's family and Curve Lake First Nation through prayers and offerings as they sat with Cileana in the hospital and after her death. Cileana, as all our Indigenous women, are a sacred and a part of the continuation of life for our people, our culture, and our traditions. They are the link and the connection to our future generations, Chief Carr said in her letter. Cileana had value. Cileana had a full life ahead of her. The loss of Cileana's life is unacceptable to our First Nation, to all peoples, and to humankind. Mr. Speaker, the man who attacked Cileana was never charged for murder. Madam Speaker, we do not need more headlines of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. We need them to be safe. Cileana and all of our Indigenous women and girls deserve justice. Tonight, I ask the Liberals to listen and, most importantly, to take action. Thank you.